Hello, everybody. It's November the 8th, 2024, episode number 31 of Into the Fire, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully, the fans of the show, I noticed that there's one in there that's an old school OG. Hopefully, the rest of the fans are going to be able to find us. I've sent a couple of links, and now it looks like we're starting to get them to trickle in. That's great. It's been a long week for this country, for me. I taught a couple of different days this week at the academy. I taught death investigations for 8 hours, and then I taught interview and interrogation to our really amazing cadets in our Tulsa Police Academy. That's something that I've been doing for several years, and that's exhausting, to tell you the truth. But it's a lot of fun. I will mention this real quick because I don't want to forget about it. I'm just going to kind of promo this briefly. January the 31st. I know that a lot of you ask me, I post on there where I speak, because I was just telling Kim a second ago off air that I was speaking in Virginia Beach, which is not far from where she's at in Virginia. And that's my second time to speak there. I was speaking at the Virginia Gang Investigator Association, which special shout out to Randy Crank. He's the president of that organization. Class act. I mean, you talk about one of the Super Bowls of gang investigator conferences. But a lot of the people that tune in or watch me on Facebook or follow me on my Detective Jason White Facebook page, I often get asked, well, can we go to that? And there's a lot of the things that I speak at: homicide conferences, crisis negotiating conferences, and whoever calls me, really. The answer is no on those, but there are a few conferences, or there's a few get-togethers that actually are open to the public, and one of which was a domestic violence thing that was in Kentucky probably last year, if you remember, if you avidly follow me. But the one that's coming up is January the 31st, and if you're in the area of Fort Smith, Arkansas, January the 31st, I don't have the exact time, but it's probably going to be about 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and I'll get more official times, but you are welcome to go to the United States Marshals Museum. We're going to have an evening with me, and I'm going to be talking homicide and kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes of the first 48. So if that is something that you live within the vicinity of and you want to come there, I'll meet you. While I'm there, I hang out, I'll talk to you, I'll sign something for you, whatever you want, and it'll be a great time. So I hope to see many of you fill the house. I don't know that it's going to be an admission fee or anything. I don't think I'm making anything off of it. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but I'm sure that they would be willing to take a donation for that museum. But it's supposed to be a really amazing place, and I hope to see many of you there. To all of you that have joined me, I'm perfect. We're seeing a lot of people trickling in here. I see Steph's in here, Kathleen. These are the OGs that I missed, and that's one of the reasons that I came back. So without you tuning in, this just isn't fun for me. I want it to be fun. So the more of you that join us, the better. And I really do appreciate that. The guest of tonight, I got to tell you, this young lady, Kim Woodward, she is somebody that, I've never met her in person other than briefly speaking to her before this. I've never even spoke to her on the phone. And I met her because we're on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is one of those sites that sometimes I run across all-stars, and she reached out to me, I guess, or I did one, vice versa. I don't know, but we became friends on LinkedIn, and I started reading through her profile, and I was like, you know what, man, she's somebody exactly what I'm looking for. Somebody that's got her act together, and she's a mover and shaker in the world of criminal justice. Plus the fact that she was involved in the CIA, which it's kind of a secret to me because I'm fascinated by that. I want to know a little bit about how she got into that and how somebody gets into the CIA. But more importantly, I'm really fascinated by a couple of different things. Number one being the handwriting expert, where she's able to really gain a lot of details from people's handwriting. But I also want to mention this, and Kim, she's listening backstage. Kim, when I bring you on here towards the end, don't let me forget. But I also want to talk a little bit about detecting deception in written statements. And I don't know that we'll have a lot. I'm really more interested in written statements, actually, but oral statements would be cool too. And I see her nodding in the background, so that's great. Let's get to it. Kim Donnelly Woodward is a certified handwriting analyst, former CIA intelligence officer, and educator. Her skills and experience include strategic interviewing, threat assessment investigations, surveillance and counter surveillance, statement analysts, and detecting deception in handwriting and personality profiling through handwriting as well. She is a member of the American Handwriting Association, the British Academy of Graphology, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners. She has conducted handwriting-based threat analysis for Forbes 400 clients, personality profiles for cold case crimes. That's interesting. That's something that I might have to get more into, and private individuals. Miss Woodward served overseas in Latin America and traveled extensively, living in Europe and Southeast Asia. She is fluent in Spanish, and Miss Woodward is the president and CEO of Right Insights, which is her website, which we're going to post that up here, and feel free to look into that and read more about her. That's an LLC which offers handwriting analysis services. I look through here and I look through her education, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to say that all I have is a bachelor's degree, but she's got a motherload of her education is just extensive, all the way up to a master's in educational counseling. She's a certified graphologist. She has a bachelor's degree in anthropology, which is another thing that I think is just absolutely fascinating. Let's welcome Kim Woodward to the show. Kim.
Hey, Jason, it's great to be here with you tonight.
It's awesome for you to be here. Have you ever been on a podcast?
I have not. This is my first, so I am just thrilled to be here.
I love it because you know what I love about that is that you're not the first person that's come on here that we've literally brought on for the very first time, and I would not be surprised if you don't have individuals reaching out to you in the future. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're living in the East, you're living in Virginia, and you're a handwriting expert.
Yeah. So, Jason, thanks for that introduction. That was, I'm very humbled by that introduction. So thank you for that, for all those kudos. Yeah, I've done a lot of different interesting things in my life, and I'm very happy to share something that's a passion for me. That is handwriting analysis, and it's something that people don't know very much. Actually, in many parts of the world, it's utilized much more so than in the United States. And people don't realize that. And they also don't realize that in this country, we actually used to teach it in some universities, the UC system in California, several universities in New York, et cetera. It was considered part of psychology. And so you can see, of course, where psychology is essential when we're doing criminal profiling. So handwriting analysis is a really important piece of that in criminal profiling. And I know that's kind of right up your alley. So when I was with the CIA, I became aware of, different techniques that were utilized that I can't really speak to you about in depth about that. But I was privileged and honored to serve my country in that capacity. And I did get to live overseas during that time, in a country that is undergoing a lot of unrest right now. Mm-hmm. I then switched gears later in my career, and I became a counselor. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, that's a big switch there. I always say, if you're lucky, life is long, and it enables you to follow your dreams and your passions. And having served overseas, I knew that I also wanted to give back to my own community as well. So I was able to kind of work globally to help, at the macro level, to help our policymakers and collect intelligence and information overseas. And then as a counselor, I've also felt like I've been able to help and make an impact on my community with young people and so forth. And I've actually utilized handwriting analysis in all of those capacities along the way. I was actually trained through a British school, which you mentioned, British Academy of Graphology. And the reason why I was trained over there is that really, like I said, Europe and the United Kingdom and Israel as well, have really been first and foremost the leaders in graphology. And there's research that's been done really for the past, century or so, that's come out of Europe that hasn't really been shared or incorporated as much into the US. I like to tell people when I start off that handwriting is brain writing. And if the listeners out there, I don't know if you want to do kind of a fun activity that's real quick. If you have a sheet of paper, it can be a scrap of paper. It doesn't have to be anything big. and you have a writing instrument, pen, pencil, doesn't matter. Go ahead, write a circle, draw a circle. And Jason, I want to see you when you're done. So hold it up when you're done. I want to see your circle. All right, I can see it there. Okay. Anybody in the audience have a really big circle? You're feeling really expansive tonight, or a tiny circle? Jason's circle is in the middle of his paper. So that's kind of interesting because Jason right now, he's hosting the podcast, right? Jason is a person who obviously has amazing experience, confidence, and right now he's the center of attention. He's hosting a podcast right now. So he's got a lot of leadership abilities. He doesn't mind the spotlight. His circle's right in the middle of the paper. Okay, now there might be some of you out there who maybe made a little circle up in the corner. Okay, think about that. You know, maybe how does that reflect how you like to present yourself in the world? And then let's do it again. Let's do something. Let's write the word active. I'm feeling very active now. Got a lot of energy. So let's write the word active. All right, let's see, Jason, how does yours look up there? Let me see if I can see it. Okay, looks like you've got a moderate amount. That was very nice printing, by the way.
Thank you.
You've got a moderate amount of activity right now. It's getting later in the day on a Friday, so you're probably not as, as energetic as you would be on a normal morning, perhaps. I don't know if you're a morning or night person, but so for some of you guys, you can look at the way you wrote active and look at it and say, hey, how am I feeling? Am I feeling active? Am I feeling tired? The more you kind of look at your own handwriting, even as a layperson with no training whatsoever, you can kind of see how, hey, you know what? There is something here in handwriting analysis. So anyway, circling back to the brainwriting part, okay? If handwriting is brainwriting, we view it as an expression of basically some impulses going on in our brain. And we know that handwriting is controlled by the part of the brain called the Broca area, which is the frontal lobe that is in control of language. So it gets expressed through our brain, our neurological system, and then with our fine motor skills, then it's translated onto the page. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is no two persons' handwriting is the same. Okay. Now, do I have a research study to back that up? No, I don't, because that's an impossible study to do. We'd have to look at everybody's handwriting in the world and say, yep, nobody's is the same. But we have other studies that show some pretty significant information that there's something behind handwriting. One of those studies actually reveals people who have lost a limb, or they were right-handed and they lost the use of that arm over time. Their handwriting in with their left hand actually becomes the same as it was with the right. A really interesting exercise for you guys out there, if you are very, very patient over time, if you're right-handed, say, start writing with your left hand. Eventually, if you stick with it, and it's going to take a long time, you're going to develop the same handwriting. Right now, for me, my handwriting with my left hand is a chicken scratch. I can't read it at all. Yeah. But trust me, if you kept going on your left hand, eventually it would take on the same look, your handwriting would. They've even done studies where people have lost, unfortunately, tragically, their hands, and they've started to write with an instrument using their toes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and that as well becomes the same handwriting as I used to have when they were able to use it, hold a pen with their hands.
Which makes sense because it's brain writing. You're using, that's what you're doing. So
yeah, that's what you're doing. So, it's very interesting to know that because of that, when people purposely alter their writing, they try to disguise their writing. That's something that a trained eye can pick up on. And that's where the training comes in. So when we talk about handwriting analysis, Jason, I like to kind of put two main parts to it. One is handwriting analysis done to look at somebody's character, right? We're looking at personality traits. We're looking at their emotivity, right? Their emotional world, their activity level, okay? Their intellectual world, and then their adaptability. Those are kind of the four main aspects that we look at. The other part of handwriting analysis involves what you may have heard of, which is document examination. And that is the world of forgeries, anonymous writing, disguised writing. Some of the most famous cases involving handwriting are actually more in that world. You may have heard about the, I believe it was 1932, the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. That tragically, of course, the baby died, and Bruno Hauptmann was caught using handwriting analysis in the fact that I guess what happened is he had been doing the ransom notes over time and was being paid with gold notes. He was on the run. I think he was in a New Jersey gas station, and he paid with his gas with one of the gold notes. And the clerk thought, oh, this is a little bit strange. I'm going to take down this guy's driver's license. So he did. They caught up with him. They tracked down his license plate. They caught up with him, and they had him write some statements. And lo and behold, even though he attempted to disguise his writing, the experts involved in the case were able to match it to his other writings that they found were his. So that was an example of he had tried to disguise writing, but the experts were able to identify him as the writer. The Hitler diaries, that's another famous case you may have heard about. This was back in the 1980s, and they were actually multiple diaries that were found from a plane crash in East Germany at the time. This was before unification. The individual involved was attempting to sell these diaries for a very pretty penny to some very famous magazines. Der Stern in Germany, I believe Rupert Murdoch at the time was the owner of a British paper they had agreed to buy these. And it came under scrutiny that, first of all, not only were these diaries a little bit, let's say, on the mundane side. You know, Hitler was writing about kind of some food that he ate or some basic, plans. Oh, I'm going to go meet so-and-so. It was a little, the content was a little bit strange. And what happened is that they got a handwriting expert to look at these diaries. The comparison material, though, that was provided. Okay, so we had some comparison material that everybody thought was Hitler's actual writing. That was provided to the experts so that they could compare to the diaries. So you have Hitler's writing samples and you have the diaries. Initially, what happened is that the handwriting analysis said, oh, yeah, no, it's him. It's legit. Okay, it's a deal. Okay, so everybody was very excited. People were going to make a lot of money on this. What happened is that eventually they found out that the samples given to the handwriting analyst to compare had been forged by this same person. Okay. And so there you have a colossal mess where, people were about ready to spend millions of dollars for this. Yeah. And handwriting analysis got a little bit of a bad rap during that snafu in the 1980s with that case, but it was because the information that was provided to them to compare to say, and again, we're not looking at character analysis here. We're looking at question document in terms of, is this forgery or is this legit? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's what happened with that case.
Now you agreed you'd sent me some exemplars. You sent me some examples, one of which, Amanda, throw up the one with Jeffrey Dahmer real quick.
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm sure we've all have heard of Jeffrey Dahmer. Maybe for some of you younger folks, you haven't heard as much about him, but he was a very notorious, serial killer who basically during the 1980s, he targeted young men, and he not only murdered them, but he dismembered them, performed some acts of necrophilia and cannibalism with his victims. So he was a very disturbed individual. And we see his handwriting here on the screen. And, when you look at it initially at the first glance, it looks kind of innocent almost, and in a ways a little bit childlike. So you have to really kind of dig deep and look at the handwriting in detail. So when we look at handwriting for character purposes, as we're going to do now with him, there's essentially 7 general categories we're going to look at. So those would be form, which is how the letters are formed, direction, okay, the direction of the lines, the individual letters, the dimension, in other words, the size. He was a very sick individual, yes. The layout, in other words, how the handwriting's presented on the page. Continuity, which is how letters are connected to each other if it is cursive writing. In this case, it is not, it's print. The pressure of the writing, and that's very significant especially when we're looking at criminals. And also the speed, which is actually another aspect when we're looking at criminals. So interestingly enough, let's see, I think it was in the 1930s, there was an Australian handwriting analyst, and she did studies on oh gosh, I don't even know how many criminals' handwritings. She basically figured out that there were 8 signs. When I mean signs, I mean indicators in the writing that appeared over and over and over with these criminals. And then another handwriting analyst or graphologist, graphology is handwriting analysis for character purposes. This woman, Iris Hatfield, she did amazing work in Kentucky with prisoners. So she worked in the prison system in Kentucky over many years doing a very in-depth research study, and she boiled it down as well, the criminality to certain aspects, which we can see in Jeffrey Dahmer. So some of these aspects that are really evident in Dahmer's writing include, basically, he's got a lot of, if you look at some of the letters really closely, and then it's kind of hard to see, a lot of his oval, like the A in I can, which is about 6 lines down on the right. A lot of his A's and his O's, they don't close completely, okay? That shows up over and over. Missing letters or parts of letters show up over and over and over in criminal type of individuals' writing. Abrupt stops. And, if you want to do a fun activity on your own one day, buy some of that tracing paper. You can order some from Amazon, that real thin tracing paper. Lay it over some handwriting like this one, and attempt to copy it, trace it with the tracing paper, and you will get a feel for the tension of this individual. And it's a very interesting thing to do. Might give you a little heebie-jeebies, especially with something like this.
I'd never heard that. That is kind of weird. Hey, if you don't mind, let's throw up. I want to throw up Susan Smith's real quick, and the reason why is because with Susan Smith, actually November the 20th, she's having her parole hearing.
Oh,
and as a matter of fact, she's coming up really close to actually just basically, she had a 30-year sentence, and she's getting really close to getting out entirely. But she's got a parole hearing coming up, gosh, in a week and a half. And so it'll be really interesting. If you don't know about Susan Smith, in the mid-90s, she'd actually driven her 2 children into the lake in Union, South Carolina. They were going to do the death penalty, and I think she did a plea deal with them or something to take the 30. But she's had an interesting run in prison. I mean, I know she's had a lot of sex with a lot of guards, some supervisors as well. So I mean, things like that. That's not condoned. That's called rape. But she's been there. That's coming up actually in an article. If you were to look her up, that came up in an article. But I am interested to see throw hers up there, Amanda. Is that the one?
Yeah, that's Susan Smith. So, Susan Smith, as Jason said, she made it look like there was a carjacking that went on that resulted in her 2 very young children being drowned. Okay. What was going on in the background of her life at the time was that she was having an affair with somebody who she wanted to have an affair with. They were at the beginning of a relationship, but he said, everything's great with you. I love you. But the kid thing, I don't know. Right. So here we have somebody who went to the extreme measures of killing her own children. Okay, with the hopes of continuing a relationship with this person. So when we look at the handwriting, I talked about layout being one of the 7 kind of broad categories we look at. She's filled up that entire page. It's very crowded. But what strikes me the most when I look at is this is the handwriting of a very young person. And when we talk about dimensions, we talk about the zone of the handwriting. So if we're talking about cursive or print, Okay, if we look at the O's, the N's, the A's, the E's, those are all what we call middle zone letters. Those are in the middle if you picture handwriting. If you have a D or a T, okay, you have upper extensions that extend upwards. Okay, those we call upper zone parts of the word. And then, of course, the lower zone are our lower extension letters, such as the Y, the G, the J, etc. Now, looking at her handwriting, what zone do you guys think is her dominant zone here? Any ideas? Anybody want to put in the chat?
Yeah, I'll let them answer that. I'll tell you, while they're answering that, I'm curious, and I know there's got to be something to it, is the fact that you see those two double lines that go down on the right side of that paper. It's like almost as, and I think I've heard this before. It's like they don't conform to the norm. Does that make sense to you? It's like, when somebody writes in all caps or they write outside of the lines, stuff like that. Is there something to that?
Well, okay, somebody said upper. Okay, that's a good guess. I really, if you look very closely, she's very middle zone oriented. And we talk about the middle zone. I know everybody's saying upper or lower. When we talk about the middle zone, we're talking about the here and now and the daily life. Okay, when we're talking about upper zone, we're talking more about people's consciousness, people's morals and values, their idealism or lack thereof, those types of loftier things. Mm-hmm. When we talk about that lower zone, we're talking more about people's instincts and drives, okay? Not to get too Freudian or anything like that. Jason, regarding your question, this layout would be called invasive. An invasive layout to me basically interprets as this is somebody who they want to just put it all out there. They have so much to say that they don't even have the awareness of boundaries with others. This is somebody who is so self-centered, Jason, that she cannot even think of the health and safety of her children before her own, selfish romantic interests. So this is somebody who is immature, extremely selfish, but also at the same time, she's very perfectionistic and very rigid. If you look at, and I mentioned direction as being one of those 7 items. If you look at the baseline of her handwriting, and what I mean by baseline, if you look at each line by line, it is pretty even going along. There is not a lot of variation. So that's a very rigid, perfectionistic writing with a lot to say about myself and myself. And I have a lot to say about myself. When you think about handwriting and you look at it there on the page, it's not that different from body language sometimes. You can look at somebody, the way they walk into a room, the way they make eye contact, or they put their shoulders back, or they do something specific with their body language. And those two things, they're kind of very similar in the way they present themselves. But her story is fascinating. So she's going to be out on parole in just a few weeks.
Well, she's going up for a parole hearing.
Okay.
I don't know that she's going to get it granted or not, but it's really unusual for somebody to spend the entire 30 years in prison. So I would be surprised, honestly, if she didn't get out. But especially in today's day and age. But you never know. I mean, you never know. I don't know. Let's throw up. I want to throw up Ted Bundy's real quick too. Let's do Ted Bundy's. Show that picture. Well, first of all, show the picture of Ted Bundy, and remember that's Kathy Kleiner. She was on this show a few months ago. She's a friend of the show, and she's my buddy. So Kathy actually survived the Chi Omega sorority house, and she's become a dear friend of mine. I really like her. But so let's throw the letter up again. So tell us about this one, because this one looks like it's really, to me, just looking at it, it looks really sloppy, and he was a super intelligent guy. At least I think he was. I mean, you're probably going to.
He was very intelligent. You're right. You're right about that, Jason. And, for those of you, just a little background on Ted Bundy, he was very sophisticated in the way he went after his victims, and in the fact that he duped them by different stories. He would put his arm in a brace and say that he needed help moving something into his van or that type of thing. And so he presented himself with a certain panache, a certain amiability in the way he approached people, a gracefulness. And when you look, kind of sit back from this writing a little bit of a distance, and you see some graceful movements in there. Okay, you see somebody who might be a little polished, and he was a decent looking guy too. So people saw him, and he seemed well mannered and well spoken, and fairly attractive, which is almost impossible to say now knowing who he is. But and so at first glance, right? Okay, you see that in his writing, but then, ooh, like Jason said, you look at it and gosh, what's going on here? There's a lot of tangles in here. As you can see, we talked about lower zone, his loops and his F's and his Y's are falling into each other and extending above and down into each other, confusing the lines. So there's not even really good separation in the lines. This is usually reflective of someone who is in a very distracted state in terms of stress and mental health. He also has a lot of, if you look at it, I think it says quarterback troubles right there in the middle. He's writing something about the NFL. I don't even know. His angular movement there is there's almost a reactive pressure going on there. And it's very disturbing, but at the same time, there's a compulsion to it because he keeps doing those inflated lower zones, those lower loop Fs. It's almost a compulsion. And like I said before, that kind of is reflective of the instinctual side of the personality, the id, if you will, if you want to be Freudian. And he's really battling to control those to a point of a compulsion, but clearly he was not able to do that. His is something where they actually did use handwriting. I believe there were some notes that were found in one state, because he not only did the murders, like you said, at Florida State University, but there were some other states as well where he committed heinous acts, and they were able to compare some writing from different locations, and that assisted in his eventual arrest.
Interesting. Well, and then the last one that you'd sent me, and this is a young lady. I had no idea about this one. Throw this last one up. Who was a nurse, and
this case was very disturbing, and it was huge news in England where it occurred. It did get some press over here just because it was just so egregiously awful. This young neonatal nurse, Lucy Letby, was working in a hospital in England, and over a period of time, there were some very tragic, really unexplained deaths of these newborn babies that were under her care. And it came to light eventually that she was responsible for their deaths. And the note that Jason showed for you guys is, well, I don't think I need to tell you that it's disturbing. She's writing in many different forms. And when we look at the layout, first of all, she's got writing all, in different directions. She's basically, her emotional state right now, as she wrote this, is definitely struggling. And you can tell that she is, if you look, we're talking about direction of the line. If you look at the line where it says, me getting too much, everything, hate myself, taking over my life, from then on, the lines start to kind of fade down at the end. And this is indicative of, she's usually, I'm sure she's probably in a depressed state of panic. Because she is admitting what she did. And we do find it common in depressed or people who are, so disturbed that they're spiraling downward, that their handwriting will tend to slope down at the end. In fact, I've done some significant work with some suicide notes and some studies. And unfortunately, it's pretty clear that oftentimes the writing will tail down and slant downwards in suicidal patients. I know there's been some research done as well that revealed that handwriting analysts were able to detect depression as well as psychiatrists by looking at the handwriting of people who might be depressed at the time. So that's showing up for me there. And goodness, I don't know what's going to happen to her. I think she's been imprisoned. I'm not sure if the trial's gone on yet or what, but that was just an awful case in England.
How was she killing them?
I think she was sticking that. Yeah, I think she was poisoning them somehow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's sad. Was it? I mean, and I don't know. Is it almost like some form of a Munchausen by proxy, where she liked the attention of the fact that she was involved in this death in some way, shape, or form? You think, or do they?
I like that characterization of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, and the other thing I wanted to mention real quick. Well, actually, let's mention this briefly. The JonBenet Ramsey ransom letter is probably one of the most famous letters or writings that in our lifetime. I can't think, maybe there's another one, but that one really stands out to me. And you've read it, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but I mean, when you read that, and you've probably, and of course you've seen the writings of the other people in the family. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll be honest with you, Jason. I have done some work on this case just for a cold case detective friend of mine. And there was an individual who was associated, who was considered a suspect at the time, who lived not very far away, who was a pedophile, who confessed to the killing afterwards. And, we're able to look at some of his handwriting. And I'll tell you, I felt like very strongly there was a very good chance that this individual is the one who committed the crime.
I know who you're talking about. It came up in a documentary recently.
Gary Oliva.
What's his name?
Gary Oliva.
That's right. I think there's plenty of YouTube videos on this guy, I think.
Yeah, and I believe he was due to come out of prison as well, I believe, earlier this year. I'm not sure.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting. So you're thinking, I mean, and then the other thing I wanted to mention to you briefly, just a little bit, I want to make sure that I get this in here. I've met one person like you before. Well, actually, I've met one handwriting person that actually worked for our police department. And so he was a police officer. How hard is it? I mean, do a lot of departments to have a handwriting expert or that's a cop?
I don't believe so.
Probably not.
I believe they need to look outside of their own officers. I do offer, and I have actually a course that I offer that I can do online and in person, where I do, it's a 1-day course, and the half of the day is on handwriting analysis for character, like we were talking about. The other half is looking at more the document examination aspect of handwriting, where we're looking at forgeries and disguised writings and so forth. But I think more and more, people are very aware that anything they put on their phone, their email, any type of digital communication is discoverable. And so if people really want something not to be found or discovered, people are going to be writing more, even though we don't think that's going to be the case. I do believe there are quite a few people, big names out there in the world who are writing and then destroying their notes simply for that reason, because we all know anything we do electronically is discoverable.
All right. So then the other thing that I remember, and the one thing that I took from it, and I may have heard her wrong, but this is what I remember in my brain, is this is a lady that does similar what you do, but she does detecting deception in written statements. And I'm going to show this. So basically, and of course, these aren't real words, right? But the example she gave was basically somebody writing normal, and then it gets all kind of jacked up, like they're nervous. And then it gets back to normal. And she says, this is an area that you need to consider that this could she said, this isn't something you can use in court, but it's something to pay attention to, because this is the part where she's getting nervous, or they're getting nervous. But what she said that I thought was interesting, and she could have been completely nuts. I don't know, maybe, but this is what I remember is that she'd said, and then turn the paper upside down, and it really, really is pronounced to you where it jumps out. Is there truth to that? Is that something that, tell me, is that even?
No, absolutely, Jason. So I think really, I like to call this kind of written statement analysis, right? We all know that police departments, and you're probably trained and familiar with statement analysis, analyzing statements, how people use words, but how they write those statements, those are pretty significant and can be interpreted and be a very valuable tool. So if you are asking, say you have 3 employees at the 7-Eleven, and you know there was an inside job, somebody stole 3 6-packs, right? Okay. You ask each of those employees to sit down and write a statement. I did not steal the 6-packs on February 8th, 1995, whatever, right? Okay. A trained handwriting analyst can look at those 3 statements and they can tell you which person might be a little bit hesitant, might be trying to hide something. And I think that's what you're referring to. So it can be a very valuable technique for law enforcement officers. And I kind of refer to that as a written statement analysis, where we're not looking at this for character necessarily, although that could be part of it. But we're looking to see, is there a pause? Is there a gap here? Is there a gap there? Are there, some uneven lines and changes in pressure that may indicate that the person was not writing naturally? Now, are they going to be nervous when they're writing something like this? And this could affect how they write? Sure. So ideally, we would probably do activities with them, with the suspects, where they are writing for a time before they actually write the statement. Okay. That tends to help kind of get them more relaxed and have it be a more natural style of writing.
What do you think of the Zodiac case? I know that it was a lot of code, but what are your thoughts about the Zodiac?
That was talk about pressure. I talked about the 7 types of handwriting aspects we looked at. Pressure there was so extreme. And like I said, take out a piece of tracing paper one day, go over, get a sample, print it up, put the tracing paper over there, and try to get a feel for the amount of pressure and precision and spacing that went into each of those letters, forming those words, and those, the movement. The movement was very slow, very deliberate, very planned, and very intense. And that's not a normal person. Okay, so that's just it from a big picture. But do yourself a favor, if this type of thing interests you, get the tracing paper and do it, because you really can try to kind of get into somebody's head by getting a sense of how their writing flowed. Are they gripping the pen like this? Are they writing with ease? Right?
Yeah.
So that's a fun exercise. Kind of gets you in their brain a little bit.
And I know I'm peppering you with people that you didn't send me exemplars on, but the other one that just kind of popped, I'm obsessed with criminals and crime, and it's just part of the being what I do. But D.B. Cooper, that's another, when he basically wrote out that letter, and I don't know that you're going to remember it or not, but of course he's the one that robbed a bank and jumped in a plane and then jumped out of that plane. But he had wrote some kind of things. I think he wrote something on I don't remember if it was the note that he had given the teller or something like that, where he wanted exactly X amount of money. I don't remember. I shouldn't even bring that one up because I don't know it well enough. But I mean, do you find yourself sitting at home watching, politicians or people like that because they're probably really good to detect lying through oral statements. I don't know, just picking on politicians, but I think that anybody that you're watching on TV, well, I kind of was picking on politicians actually, because I know that but I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I'm serious.
Yeah.
But in reality, I mean, I'm sure you find yourself literally sitting on your couch going, they're lying. I mean, because you detect oral deception in oral statements too. And
Yes.
I really wish that we got more training on that. I got to be honest with you, because we really don't get much in it.
But you know, Jason, let me give you the flip side, because if we get away from criminality, one thing that's so amazing about looking at people's handwritings, if you looked at the handwriting of Albert Einstein, Oppenheimer, I mean, people who, you know, who's Da Vinci, right? Want to go way back. People whose brain, you know, who have just made incredible contributions to our world and whose minds are just, you know, way ahead of the average person's in terms of creativity and intellect and innovative, you know, energy and so forth. When you look at their handwriting, it just blows you away. Try to copy those two, you know, Albert Einstein's, Oppenheimer, you know, clarity, speed, precision, just such a fine touch. You know, it just really gives you an idea of, wow, you know, this brain, this is a whole different level.
Really?
And so, you know, yeah.
You can literally see that. And I mean, on those individuals, because I mean, Einstein, as smart as he was, I mean, you know, sometimes smart people are kind of, they don't appear smart. Does that make sense? Where they're
Sure.
just kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, this guy. A lot of times they're, you know, they're not really good in school either. You know, they didn't do very well in school, probably because they're bored or whatever. But you can see that in their handwriting. And are we talking their handwriting looks like it's really? I mean, you said that about me. You said my handwriting was very nice. I'll tell you something. And I'm not saying that I'm super smart or anything, but I will tell you that my fifth grade teacher, or no, it was my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Grimes in California. I still remember him. He used to always tell us, he goes, listen, people are going to judge you on your handwriting for the rest of your life. And he made a very, very concerted effort to make sure that we had very, very, shout out to Sutter Creek Elementary in California. He made a very, very concerted effort to make sure that we were very attentive on being neat in our handwriting. And it's just stuck with me all these years. And not only that, not only printing, but writing in cursive, which is becoming a lost art today.
Well, you know, it's great that you brought that up, because what has started recently, research has been brought to the, you know, people's attention who are in the need to know, right? In different states, the education departments in many states, that the learning of cursive, instruction of cursive in elementary school, usually second grade, in Virginia, you know, I think it's No More Tears handwriting. There's different programs they use. Increase and boost self-esteem in children, increases and boosts their identity, and also as importantly, increases learning. And they've done these studies with adults as well. Keyboarding is great. Of course, we're all keyboarding. We're all in the modern world. We're using computers all the time. However, if you really want to retain information for a significant long period of time in a meaningful way, write it down. Okay. And I think the best professors and the best teachers out there are still having their students write down their notes as they're doing their lecture or what have you. Because you can sit there and you can type. And how many of us multitask when we're typing? I know I do. I might be typing an email to somebody, but I'm also listening to this and I'm also looking over here. Okay. But when we're handwriting, there's something that's happening in our brain. It's almost being inscribed in our brain. Okay. Because like we said at the beginning of the show, handwriting is brain writing. Okay. So your brain is actually going through the movements. You are creating that information as you write it down. Do a fun test and, you know, try it out one day and see. Maybe you're studying a foreign language or you're learning some type of new skill. Try to take notes on it with your hand, you know, handwriting, versus, okay, I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to type my notes in there that way and see which works better. But anyway, they're starting to do it. Virginia, they've reinstated cursive in the curriculum in second grade. I know there's many other states that are following suit because of this research that's been very significant. So we kind of swung, as we do with many things, the pendulum swings too far one side, technology, kids in kindergarten have laptops. Now we're trying to correct a little bit and we're realizing, hey, it's still really important for them to be able to write. And I think what's fun about that too is when you think of going to a first or second grade class with 6, 7-year-old kids. And, there's a paper somebody dropped on the floor and there's no name on it. And the teacher holds it up and says, "Oh, whose paper is this?" Oh, the kids will be able to tell you. How can they tell you? Because they recognize the handwriting. Oh, that's Johnny's.
Yeah.
That's Johnny. Oh, see that big handwriting? Oh, that's Johnny. That's the kid who's climbing on the bookcase over there, right? Who's trying to get all of his energy out. Or, oh, that's Grace's handwriting. Look at how perfectly formed those letters are. And she's sitting over in that corner reading a book, right? So it's fun.
I'll tell you something funny. I got to tell you a quick story real quick. And then I want to hear about, how people can reach out to you and so forth. But I think she said something one time, this handwriting person. And so I just kind of took something that she had said. And she said, basically, this is what I did. I wrote truth, or I put truth and then lies. And then I wrote a line down the middle of it. And as I'm interviewing this guy, I basically said, "So what's your name?" And he tells me his name, and I put a mark in the truth column. And he's seeing me do this. I'm making sure that he's seeing me do this. And then I was like, "Okay, well, where do you live?" "I live here." "Okay, true." "So what happened?" And then he starts telling me, and then I'm marking as he's lying to me, marks. And he finally got to the point, literally, he's watching me do that. I could see him getting so uncomfortable as he's sitting there. And he's like, "Wait a second. No, wait. I'm telling you the truth about that now." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you weren't earlier, right?" And he's like, "No, you're right. Yeah." And then he ended up falling apart and just telling me the truth. And it was all simply because I was just playing a game with this guy.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
But all right, so people can. Do you teach? Do you go present anywhere in the country? Do you ever get offers to do that, or have you
I
done
do.
that?
I have this training course, like I mentioned, that I'm going to be presenting pretty soon. I've done a lot of work, not very recently, but a couple of years ago for some Forbes 400 clients, in a very private capacity, where we had some high network individuals who received kind of threatening letters from employees. Like I kind of had that example before. This was different though. This was somebody who, lived on a big estate and had multiple employees, and threatening letters were discovered, and they kind of had an idea of 3 or 4 people who might have written them.
Yeah.
And then I was called in to consult on that. I'm also doing on some art forgery work, which is pretty interesting too. That's a big
that
field.
sounds fascinating.
Yeah. And so we have the forgery of the artwork itself, which is not my cup of tea. I'm not an artist. I don't know anything about that. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at the signatures.
Well, that's really amazing, and that's fascinating. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have somebody on here coming up in the very near future by the name of Amy Herman. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she actually utilizes art to train detectives to actually be more observant of details and so forth. And she's going to be coming on. She's actually speaks all over the world. She's fascinating, and she's agreed to come on here in the future. It'll be great. Listen, if people want to get a hold of her, there's her website. Go ahead and throw her email up there, if you don't mind, Amanda. There's her email. You could literally email her. Believe it or not, there's a lot of cops that listen to us throughout this country. I run across them from California to Virginia. Actually, there's Virginia cops that are going to be listening to us right now, which is great because you actually are in Virginia. So that wouldn't be too difficult for you to maybe put on a class to an agency somewhere out in that region. Easy. You know how law enforcement agencies are. They're cheap. So that would be it's just the way of the world. I'm sorry, but conferences, on the other hand, I'm already thinking about you for a future conference, maybe in San Antonio for the Homicide Investigators of Texas. You never know. We'll see. I think that this stuff is great. Kim, we're running out of time, but I'm going to tell you something. I am so honored that you joined us here tonight, and doesn't 54 minutes just fly by?
It's crazy. So fun.
Yeah. Good. Maybe we'll have you on again if some big, huge case comes on, or some reason that we need to talk more. You feel free to reach out and tell me, because I have no doubt we could fill another 54 minutes with some exciting stuff. Absolutely. To the ladies and gentlemen that have been watching us tonight and that are going to listen to us further, hey, thanks a lot. I mean, I'm honored to have this podcast. I truly mean that. I'm honored to have you as our loyal fans. Spread the word. Come back, join us. Thanks for catching us live tonight and spending a Friday evening. I'm sure you have much better things to do on a Friday night, but I don't know, maybe not, because I'm pretty cool and so's Kim. So we had a good time tonight. Thank you all very, very much. And we will see you next time. Take us out, Amanda.